Hello and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Amanda. I am one of the registered dietitians here at the Stony Brook World Trade Center Health and Wellness Program Nutrition Department. I am recording today's presentation as when we provided this presentation live during the month of May, the recording had lapsed. So without further ado, today I will be presenting on understanding hunger, fullness, cravings, and mindful eating. We're going to cover what is hunger, the physiological needs for foods, the psychological needs for food, as well as environmental triggers throughout today's session. And we will wrap up with some resources and a summary. So, first things first, what is hunger? And this might sound like a redundant question, but we want to tap into the difference between hunger and craving. So, the official definition is that there is a desire or a physiological need for food, right? Our body gives us various cues that are set off by our hypothalamus. Sometimes it can indicate that we feel thirsty or shaky. It comes on slowly as that stomach gradually empties its contents into the small intestine for it to absorb into the bloodstream. It does not pass with distraction. A growling stomach can, of course, be a sign as those stomach muscles contract. Lightheadedness as our blood sugars get low. A headache to go along. And, of course, fatigue as we're not getting the energy that we need. We like to utilize the hunger fullness scale as a measure of tapping in and ranking our hunger. Knowing the scale will help you determine both your hunger needs and a need to eat based on how much, or if you're too full, or if there's maybe a craving. So the closer we start to one, which is that starving and feeling dizzy or weak sensation, the more likely we are to end at 10, right? So we want to start eating at that 3 mark. We're feeling, the onset of hunger, our stomach starts to growl. And when we start at more of like a 3, we're more likely to end at a 6, which is that pleasantly full, slightly full, satiated feeling. But it's not that sensation that I have to go, unbuckle my pants or my belt. And we like to go into blood sugar nutrition to discuss this hunger fullness scale, as we want to try to eat every 3-4 hours. And that would ensure that we can eat at about a 3 or a 4, because if we're eating greater than that period, then we're likely going to a 1, right? And we're eating more 4 or 5 hours or greater than that. So why does this happen? Why do we need food? And how does this dictate our hunger, fullness, and our physiological cues? So at the bottom corner of the graph, that's about the time in which we start to eat, right? We've got blood glucose on the y-axis, or our blood sugar, and on the x-axis, we've got our time in minutes. So when we eat carbs, they break down pretty quickly, and they absorb into our bloodstream from the small intestine. This causes a gradual rise in our blood sugar. That's that number 2, as glucose is released into the bloodstream from that meal. So carbs contain glucose. So fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans and legumes, our starches and our sweets all contain glucose, which elevate the blood sugar at that peak top. And then it comes back down once insulin is released to lower the sugar levels so that they can enter the cell, as insulin is the gatekeeper to unlock the cell for the sugar to enter. With that being said, certain foods change our absorption of our sugar. Sometimes some foods absorb faster, slower, based on various combinations of nutrients within it. So, right here is our carbohydrate spectrum. I like to use this spectrum to dictate and to explain to individuals that, not all carbs are the devil, but there's better options than others, right? And ones that you want to have more frequently than others. So on the left is that higher fiber end, the fruits, the vegetable, and the beans. And as you go from left to right, from the fruits to the soda, fiber decreases, right? So you have your high glycemic index foods and your low glycemic index foods. So low glycemic index foods are likely to contain foods that are more binding, or macronutrients, I should say, that are more binding, like protein, fat, and fiber, right? Where those higher glycemic index foods, they have lower fiber and not much protein to bind as well. So they're going to enter the bloodstream much more quickly. As if you've ever had white bread and you let it just dissolve in your mouth, it doesn't really take much to break down. But meanwhile, if you have whole grain bread, that might take a little longer compared to an apple, compared to beans. So it's just that that sugar is more slowly entering the bloodstream. You have more time to burn it off. We're not chasing that high. And also, it keeps our A1C nice and low compared to that red high glycemic line, where that's what could indicate if we have multiple spikes like this throughout our days, an elevated hemoglobin A1C or fasting blood sugar or blood glucose at the doctor's office. But it's not just carbs that play a role in this. We also want to look at, of course, our proteins and our fats. So the red line indicates that other side of the carb spectrum that we were talking about, that lower fiber side, that's going to more likely spike the blood sugars. The apple from the apple juice is more just to indicate, higher fiber options. So that left end of that carb spectrum we were just talking about. And then now you have this green line. This green line is now meant to dictate fiber, protein, healthy fat mixing together, which is going to slow down the transit in the stomach. So now it's going to picture your GI tract like a tube. It's going to slow down how fast that food goes through that tube, and slower it empties into the small intestine, the slower it's going to likely absorb into the bloodstream. So you always want to have carbs, especially fruits, with protein and or healthy fat. Of course, of that fat, you want it to be mono and polyunsaturated fats, which we have presented on in other presentations. If you'd like to check out our heart health presentation or our January part 2 presentation. So the moral of the story is to feel more full and to carry us over from one meal to the next better without having that sensation to graze or that craving. You always want to pair higher fiber carbs with protein or healthy fat, and that's also going to help with keeping our blood sugars nice and low, so good for our labs, but also is going to be good for our weight, because if we have to process this sugar rather quickly, we don't have as much time to burn it off, and we're going to be more likely to store it, unfortunately. So this is just a slide to depict what this looks like in a typical day meal. So if you were to have a plate, a lunch, or a dinner, you want to try to make half your plate vegetables. So now you're getting that fiber. That 1/4 a lean protein, does it swim, fly, or grow from the ground? So that's going to be more binding, right? You have more protein that's going to take more time to break down. And then that last 1/4 is the starches. It's not always necessary, but it's good to have these from meal to meal, as it contains more soluble fiber, which is going to be really good for our colon health at helping to reduce cholesterol, if that's one of our concerns. It's just that this 1/4 section where you see the bread, the pasta, the rice, the quinoa, and the beans, it looks like, gives people a lot of questions. So in that section, you want to just make sure you're choosing whole grains, beans and legumes, or starchy vegetables there. And the question with starchy vegetables becomes, starchy vegetables are peas, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and squash, except for zucchini and summer squash. That zucchini, that summer squash, and all the other vegetables that I didn't say, they go in that non-starchy section. And based on your GI history, you can have as much of those non-starchy vegetables as you would like for weight alleviation purposes. On the right-hand side of that plate, you see protein slash fat with a line, and then you see carbohydrates. So it's just more to show you with snacking to pair protein healthy fat options from that column with carbohydrate options from the carb column. You can see the snacking cheat sheet on the website as well. That has a more expansive list if you would like. So next, what happens and what impacts our physiological needs, right? So we were talking about that hunger fullness chart with the numbers going from 1 to 10. So it's our meal timing, right? The longer we go without eating, the more likely we are to pick up our pace of eating, and therefore pick up our portion sizes, unfortunately. So you do want to try to eat every 3 to 4 hours. Some individuals bring up the question of intermittent fasting, and that's also something to discuss on an individual level. We do provide complimentary one-on-one nutrition counseling to all WTC Stony Brook members. So if you have questions about your particular individual meal timing, or if intermittent fasting is something that's going to work for you, I highly encourage you to schedule one of those appointments, and we offer them virtual and in person now. You want to try to eat overall within 12 hours of the day. So if you start eating breakfast at 8 a.m., you want to kind of tailor it off around 8 p.m. at night. This can allow your GI tract to properly rest and can help ensure for proper blood sugar functioning. Hydration. So I was saying earlier that our appetite signaling comes from our hypothalamus, but same with our signaling relating to our hydration. So if we're dehydrated and we're not getting enough water, about 64 fluid ounces or 8 8-ounce cups of water per day per individual on average, and we're dehydrated, that our urine is darker than pale straw to clear, then it can impact our hunger because our hypothalamus sends these signals that can be interpreted as hunger because our body does not tell the difference very well between thirst and hunger, as we can obtain water hydration from foods, right? Like water-based foods like fruits and vegetables especially. So that's why it's important to make sure that you're adequately hydrated so that you're not getting those craving signals for what seems to be food when it's water. Volume eating can help with this, which we will be getting to later in the presentation. Sleep is another one like that sometimes as individuals we get a little confused in the moment if we're not being mindful between, do I need energy from a nap and from sleep, or do I need energy from food and I'm just going to go eat something? So sleep can augment our different hormones relating to appetite. So leptin and ghrelin are our two main appetite signaling hormones. When you hear ghrelin, think growling, like my stomach is growling, I'm hungry. It's a hunger control hormone. It increases our desire to eat more. Leptin is an appetite suppressing hormone. Leptin helps you to feel more full and satiated. Fiber actually helps with the release of these hormones, but also with sleep and cortisol, which is our stress hormone. It may stimulate more appetite, and we're more likely to hold on to weight when our cortisol is spiking and we're stressed. This is how stress and appetite interact in terms of holding on to weight as well. Research shows that sleep deprivation causes an increase in overall hunger, which can lead to cravings of sugar and fat or both. So, of course, you want to make sure you're ticking those basic physiological needs. We're drinking, we're getting stress relief, we're sleeping, and we're eating all throughout the day. They're not to be surpassed in terms of basic healthy lifestyles, as the weight becomes the side effect when you focus on health and an overall healthy lifestyle. The last point I want to make is a two-prong point on variety, right? So there's that satisfaction factor that plays into our physiological needs. I would say it's actually more psychological, in that if I'm just eating brown rice, grilled chicken with no seasonings, no sauces, no nothing, and some steamed broccoli, that can be kind of boring. So yeah, I'll eat that meal, and yeah, that hit my physiological needs, but maybe that's not so satisfying. Maybe it didn't really satisfy my palate. So I might be more likely to go and grab something sweet. So you always want to figure out that satisfaction factor. You want to have meals that are healthful and mindful, but you want to also enjoy them too. The other point that I want to make relating to variety is macronutrients. So what I was touching upon with the graph before here about having fiber, protein, healthy fat together in a meal, that's variety in itself too, because protein, fiber, fat, water, they add bulk to the stomach, right? They make you feel full, they take up space. Versus if we just had carbs by themselves, for example, that break down much more readily and quickly. So we have a couple scenarios that we want to bring up eventually too. So what if I never feel hungry? Some individuals report they never feel hungry. They may be grazing throughout the day, or in general, their time and attention might be put onto other things. So then those cues for hydration, hunger aren't really coming through. It has to do with mindfulness and being present in the moment often. So you want to try to create a routine meal timing schedule based around your day. And that's where we can talk on a one-on-one level during your WTC nutrition appointments if you'd like to schedule that. So your hunger cues will start to align with your schedule the more consistent that you are with it. So we try to set up a routine, time about for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. More so, you want to listen to your hunger fullness cravings and try to eat when you're feeling about a 3 on that hunger fullness chart. You want to think about hunger disruptors. Some individuals may not be feeling hungry because of certain medications they're taking. Maybe if they're smoking, as that's an appetite suppressant, certain beverages, especially caffeinated ones, will suppress your appetite, like coffee. So if you catch yourself being the type to have multiple cups of coffee early in the morning, skipping through breakfast, getting busy through at work and skipping through lunch and, saying that you're not feeling hungry. And then by the time we get home, we're starving and we're right in the fridge. We might want to look at our coffee schedule as well and taking more time during the day for ourselves and our food needs. Like I said earlier, medications, stress and emotions. Sometimes if we're stressed, we don't eat. If we are stressed, we do eat. It depends on the individual. And of course, the environment. So if it's a high stress work environment, some individuals won't have time to eat and they just blitz through the day. Or if it's an environment that is very triggering and that there's all sorts of foods everywhere, that are less optimal and their insight and in mind, then you have to make more of those decisions in the moment to say no, then it can be a little bit more triggering. Next is, what if I always feel hungry? So I tapped a little bit into that last slide, but when someone always feels hungry, that's when you also want them to be grounded in the moment. They're not a second in the future or a second in the past. It's about being present and objectively asking ourselves, saying, am I hungry or am I craving? So like I said earlier, hunger comes on slowly. It can be for any type of food. Typically with hunger, that's a newer thing that we're going into now, usually after time has passed since eating. So you can figure, I went about 3-4 hours without eating, and it does not pass with time or distraction because your body needs food, right? You can't just suppress that. So a craving, though, will come on more quickly. It may be linked to a trigger, like a commercial of some kind. It passes with time or distraction. So, like, I might just be in the kitchen, I see something, insight in mind. So maybe getting out of the kitchen, going outside, sipping a cup of tea outside might help me just to forget about it. Um, it occurs even after you've already eaten, often occurs due to an emotion or a feeling. So food is everything to everyone and unique to everyone. So food can be love, food could be stress, food could be relaxation, food could be procrastination, food could be a hobby, you name it. So it's about tapping into what that purpose is serving, what that food, the purpose the food is serving you, and then saying, okay, sometimes it's okay to have a splurge, and we'll go into that. But if it's a moment that you're like, I don't even really want this food, it doesn't even really taste that good, why am I even eating it? And sometimes it's about being in the moment and saying, oh, I'm just eating this because I'm bored. Let me go outside or let me go call a friend instead. It can be due to fatigue or hydration as well for cravings. So just to check in with those physiological needs that we spoke about. And of course, like I said, you want to ground yourself in the moment to see what feelings or emotions that you're experiencing. You want to look at how satisfying your food is. That's that satisfaction factor I mentioned earlier, along with that satiety factor. So, of course, protein, fiber, fat, and of course, flavors that tie into that satisfaction factor all help with satiety. And then staying hydrated. Emotional hunger, right? So that's part of what I was tapping into. Food can be anything to anyone. Emotional eating is a way to suppress or soothe negative emotions such as stress, anger, fear, boredom, sadness, loneliness, etc. It is something in the moment that gives instant gratification, but often in the fleeting moments after, people tend to experience regret or, stomach aches, bloating. So I always tell individuals to think your present how your present self is going to be affecting your future self and what your future self would say to your present self in this moment if you engage in those options. But sometimes we just go into it out of habit very quickly and we don't even have a moment to ground ourselves in that. So it is important when you start to go towards the fridge or to have a snack just to mindfully ask yourself, do I need this? When was the last time I ate? Am I craving? Am I hungry? And you want to go through these little cues that we talked about already today. Food can also serve as distraction, like I was saying. So you want to serve distraction with other distraction. So to say, okay, this food is satisfying this need, you want to take that need that it's satisfying and find another task, hobby, etc., that will also satisfy that same need. So if I'm looking for food as stress relief or distraction because I'm bored, let me go off and go for a walk outside, call a loved one, play with the dog, etc. Food can be celebratory as well. So you want to find other ways to celebrate, right? It could be going out and buying a new pair of shoes, going and calling a loved one, or taking the family out to eat somewhere, but making it more of a occasion versus just having something like a snack on the side that might be processed and not very nutrient dense. So, what impacts our psychological needs or our emotional hunger? So, like I was saying, emotional eating is using food as a way to make ourselves feel better for various emotional needs versus as opposed to satiating our stomach. When we're babies, we eat when we're hungry and we stop when we're full. We have no concept of what is breakfast, what is lunch, what is dinner. We just listen to our bodies. But as we get older and we grow, so does our relationship with food. So we begin to associate eating with different environments, moods, or needs. Some people say, "Oh, I'm stressed. Let me go eat something." It's just a habit. So it's about undoing those habits and finding other ways of coping, essentially. Our attention changes over time and we disconnect from our body's physiological cues. So that's like what I was saying with the individual question before about what if I never feel hungry? That's a disconnect from the physiological needs, essentially. So that's where you're gonna want to force almost a light breakfast, lunch, dinner. Not You don't want to start with an exuberant amount of calories, but you want to get your body gradually used to having food at those times. And you want to understand the different cues as a key to tapping back into that intuitive eating. So everyone experiences hunger a little differently. For some, it's that little lightheadedness in the head, or for others, it's the stomach growling. So you want to figure out what your unique cues are to you and what hunger truly feels like to you. And of course, emotional eating is a temporary solution to a chronic problem. And I've already gone into this. What are some common emotions or feelings associated with food? And most important, it's about working with our mental health professionals or doing more meditation, grounding exercises, deep breathing to learn to acknowledge that feeling and to sense that feeling in the moment and be present. And then you want to replace that feeling that eating behavior is soothing with something else that equally soothes that feeling that you're looking to cope with. It's essentially coping. So, grounding ourselves in the present, that can be doing progressive relaxation, mindfulness, yoga, meditation, etc. There's a couple really great apps on the market called Calm, Headspace, 10% Happier, just three to name. But there's plenty more ways to meditate. And sometimes it's just taking 3 to 5 deep breaths about, a couple times a day when you need it. And to take that time for yourself, that is self-care, right? Taking time to meditate and breathe, taking time to go for a walk, taking time to meal prep. Self-care is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. To say that I need to fill my cup up so that I can pour from my cup onto others. So some examples of self-care can include calling a friend or a family member, a loved one in general, playing with a pet, taking a hot shower or a bath, stretching, meditating. Do things that feel good for you. It could just be going and painting your nails. It could be doing a face mask, and it could be playing chess. It could be researching something. But in general, I try to advise staying away from screens too much because I call it being like half occupied. It's that what do I do with my hands moment because we could be watching TV and easily mindless munching because our time and attention is focused on the screen and not our own body. So in that occasion, I like to recommend having some tea and maybe volume eating instead, which again we'll go into in a little bit, or rerouting the habit in general to maybe turn off the TV and do something else, or have another self-care act that you're doing while you're watching the TV, maybe playing Sudoku or crossword or Wordle or something like that to occupy your attention, especially during the commercial breaks. So we have some different scenarios. Scenario one we're going to go into is I don't eat much all day because I'm busy, but once I start eating at night, I can't stop. So this is similar to the question that we got earlier. So this is typically the night eater, right? If you're catching yourself having uncontrollable binges at night, um, the individual can tend to lack hunger earlier in the day, right? So if they're not getting enough calories, especially those better carbs earlier in the day, like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, and legumes, your body and especially your brain run off carbs right now unless you're doing a keto diet. And that's a whole other conversation to have one-on-one during your nutrition counseling appointments. But with that being said, if you're not getting those carbs earlier in the day, your body's going to demand it. And the fastest form of energy to break down and utilize is sugar in the white and refined carbs. So that's like those higher glycemic spiking foods, like the sweets, the sodas, the sugars, etc. So our minds are occupied during the day, so we are not in tune with our body's desire and need for energy. So that could be also being more present during the day, doing meditation, doing some deep breathing, but most importantly, eating throughout the day, right? Taking a moment for ourselves to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, 1 to 2 snacks. Because if you're getting those calories in earlier in the day, I promise you, from a physiological standpoint, you're not going to be as hungry, especially if you're drinking water, getting the satisfaction factor, getting protein in every meal, eating the right kinds of carbs, that it makes tackling the psychological aspects of it much easier versus having two devils on one shoulder. You have an angel and a devil on your shoulder, for example. So, like I said, tips, you can set a realistic amount of calories to eat during the day. We now have our Tanita body composition scale, which measures how much fat, how much muscle on each limb of the body. It measures visceral fat, which is what can go impacting many of our labs, as well as providing you with your basal metabolic rate. So that's how much calories you need to sustain the basic tissue that you are holding on to. So you can get a more accurate gauge on how many calories you might need per day if you're the type of person that needs to track, but we can always talk about that in another time. Uh, of course, setting a reminder on your phone to stop and take a lunch break or to schedule it like an appointment and say, okay, at 12 o'clock, I take my lunch break. I don't book other appointments or meetings during my lunch break unless it's like a lunch and learn or a lunch meeting, for example. When you do eat, you want to make sure you're eating slowly, especially when you get home. The slower you eat, you're giving your vagus nerve some time to catch up. So it does take some time for that nerve that links the stomach and the gut. It's a two-way highway of information. So it does take, it's like the LIE at rush hour for that signal to get up to the brain. So you want to eat slowly to enable that signal to get up to the brain. Because if we're eating fast, we could be taking in a lot more excess calories than we really need. And that's what leads to that getting smacked Thanksgiving full feeling. And then keep easy and keep quick snacks on hand. So you want to pack what you need, right? So if you catch yourself night eating, maybe we are eating breakfast and lunch, but we're going from 12 o'clock at lunch till 6, 7 o'clock for dinner, that having a snack is going to be our friend, because I used to do the same thing to myself. I would get off the train. I wouldn't eat between 12 and like 6, 7, get in the door, starving Marvin. I'm eating quickly. I'm looking for something to eat. I'm less likely to want to cook, less likely to want to choose healthy options because I'm already in a deficit. I'm already really hungry. So by putting a snack in the in between time when I was on the train of like a trail mix and some fruit, it really carried me over so that now when I get in the door, I'm much more poised. I'm much more apt to want to cook and make those healthier choices because I don't have such a ferocious hunger. I'm not at a 1, I'm more so at a 3. So some easy snacks to help with energy throughout the day, of course. In the fridge or cooler bag, you can do this grouping here with the yogurt with nuts, granola, and fruit. Low fat cheese stick, which, especially if you're watching your cholesterol in general, low fat dairy might be a better option with a piece of fruit, veggies, and hummus. So we're pairing those higher fiber carbs like veggies, maybe a bean chip, maybe a piece of fruit, maybe some nuts or granola, fruit especially, going to have some more sugar in it, like the granola and the fruit. Good carbs to pair with a protein or a healthy fat, like guacamole, low fat cheese, nuts, and yogurt. Some things that you can take most places, anytime, anywhere: trail mix, rice cakes with peanut butter, kind bar, apple with peanut butter, a protein shake. So, uh, fail to prepare, prepare to fail is our motto. So you want to make sure you keep it on you because, I already spent the money on having these snacks on hand. I'm not going to go buy something else too. So it also helps to control options. Scenario 2, I don't really snack, but I can eat large portions with no problem. I just love food. Me too. I love food. So scenario 2 is a portion control problem. It might be linked to scenario 1, right? Not getting enough food earlier in the day, causing those intense cravings depending on the timing of it. Portion control starts and ends with mindfulness. So eating speed, like we've talked about, the faster we eat, it leads to larger portions. So you want to make sure, like if you're eating with a loved one, like a family member, try to time yourselves with them if they tend to eat slower. You want to maybe try to take away other distractions like a TV, an email, a phone, like the newspaper that might enhance that pace of eating because our time and attention is put onto something else as opposed to tasting the food, chewing the food, smelling the food, and sensing our body's cues. So check in with hunger and fullness. Ideally, arrive hungry, but not starving. And you want to leave the meal satisfied, but not sick. Give yourself a portion and put the rest away in the cabinet is another trick. Don't just leave it out on the counter as if you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to be back for more anyway, so I'll just put it on the counter. No, if you're not going to be back for more, put it away. Give yourself permission to eat more if needed or desired at a later time. So when you do it and you're eating slowly, and you're like, I'm still hungry. Let me wait like about 5 minutes or so and see if it passes with time, if it's a craving, or if it doesn't pass with time and it's hunger. And if you find it doesn't pass with time, then go back and get it, but you'll be grabbing it out of the cabinet, which really isn't much more extra effort when you think about it. Remember that overeating is no less wasteful than trashing the food. Giving your body doesn't actually need the calories, right? So a lot of individuals will say, "Oh, Amanda, I eat the whole portion because, I don't want to throw it out." Well, we can always repurpose it for another meal. Or if it's already been on your plate and your forks touched it, I get that. Then the way to handle those situations is if you want to give yourself a smaller portion to begin with, eat that portion. You've got permission that if you're hungry, eat. By all means, please do that. Eat. But you don't want to overserve the portion and then feel obligated to eat the portion, if that makes sense. It's better just to serve the normal portion, have it. If you're hungry, get more. Of course, insight in mind, if you have the whole thing on the plate too, it's going to be more enticing to eat the whole thing. Um, and choose volume friendly food. So I've mentioned this a couple times. So this mindfulness, this rerouting of the craving, it's like a muscle. It's going to take time. So sometimes the best answer is I know it's a craving, but I'd rather swap it for a healthier option because right now going and distracting and doing something else isn't as realistic for me. So you want to aim for foods that you can eat a large quantity of. They tend to be more water-based foods like salads and soups or like fruits and vegetables. So you can roast them up in the air fryer if you want with some light olive oil. You can do protein oatmeal or protein chia pudding, popcorn if you don't have diverticulosis, cauliflower fried rice bowl. I like to sneak a little egg in there, yogurt and cottage cheese, or fruit. But of course, you want to talk on an individual level with your MD and your dietitian about the fruit. But mainly, you want to try to stick most people to about 2 to 3 servings of fruit a day. Yes, a banana counts as 2 servings of fruit, but no, it's not the devil. And you want to pair that with protein or healthy fat. So next is scenario 3. I feel like I'm always hungry. I am home all day and find myself going back to the kitchen multiple times per day, grazing, picking at foods and snacks. I feel like this tends to be our work from home individuals. And sometimes it's that looking for that satisfaction factor as food as relief in that sense. Um, so let's see, when food is in mind. So, of course, eating throughout the day can be helpful to maintain healthy body weight, but you don't want to be eating all throughout the day that it affects your hunger fullness cues that you're always staying at about like a 5, right? Because then that's hard to tell. Am I hungry? What's going on? When should I eat? So you want to allow space between meals, about at least meals and snacks, about 90 minutes. Um, as this can also relate to weight gain, as we're going to be taking in way more calories if we're eating in all throughout the day. So routine helps with this. You want to, of course, schedule your meals. You want to make sure that you're choosing nutrient dense options, like having protein, healthy fat paired with high fiber carbs, especially. And then that satisfaction factor with your meals is important. The reason why you don't want to graze all throughout the day and you want to allow some time to pass between meals. And even if we are someone with bariatric surgery that has to eat 5 to 6 times a day, that still alleviates and not alleviates, so that still requires time between meals. And the reason why this happens is, and it's needed, is your inside of your stomach has like a lining, right? And it starts to slough off some of that lining. But if we're, and of course, all the breakdown of the digestive juices that were in there, but if we're always eating, that doesn't have time to kind of clear out and regrow and repopulate. So it can lead to gastroparesis and something called SIBO, small intestinal bowel overgrowth, which is where someone might be getting a lot of that bloating, discomfort with any meal or any snack. And it could be a motility issue that the food is not moving as freely through the intestines. What we eat throughout the day can impact our fullness, our energy, our blood sugar levels, and our weight over time. So it is extremely important to, of course, pay attention to your meal timing and try to set meal times and routine. And we also may be grazing, and I think the big thing is about grazing is the emotional needs. Often I find people are grazing because they're looking for something satisfying because they're doing something that's not satisfying to them. So if you're working from home, not all work is fun, right? But you don't want to work in the kitchen when you're working from home. It's going to be more triggering to go and grab something when you're looking for a sense of relief. Um, and that's all about grounding yourself in the moment and realizing what emotions we're feeling and to cope for those emotions, like we've talked about earlier. This we have a cheat sheet on the website, and I think it's a really helpful tool sometimes to even print it out, put it on the table, or put it on the refrigerator as a reminder to yourself, or with little tips and tricks to help with slowing down when eating. So, sitting at the table, for some, maybe using the non dominant hand to time yourself with somebody else, like a significant other who might eat slower, and turn off distractions are some major ones. And making sure we're chewing our food. I feel that a lot of us sometimes we eat quickly and we don't really chew and taste our food. And from a pleasure standpoint, of course, that's important, right? But also from a digestion standpoint, if our food isn't being chewed up well, it can lead to a lot of that bloating and discomfort as there's bigger pieces that have to pass through. But also, especially when it comes to our plant intake, you really want to chew that up because certain foods, when you chew them, they're going to release more of their phytonutrients and then you'll be able to absorb them better, especially with sulforaphane and broccoli, for example. So just make sure that you're taking the time to chew your food. I would never tell you to count how much you're eating though. Like 25 times. I think that's a little excessive to be counting how many times we chew though. So benefits of eating slower. When we eat slower, we eat less without feeling deprived. Sometimes we look and feel better because we're not feeling sick and bloated. Um, Learn what hunger and full feel like, right? So when we're eating slower, we're able to feel more of those sensations. We're not going straight to that smacked fullness feeling. It helps us to disrupt those patterns that can derail our progress and like over portioning, excess calorie consumption, excess carb consumption, for example. And then this is a tool you can use anytime, anywhere, no matter what social occasion you're in. You can always end up eating slower no matter what options being served. Like we were talking about earlier, deep breathing is a trick to eat slower. If we add just 1 minute on, so we're timing ourselves, put down the remote, eat foods that really need to be chewed. So that's why I like to also recommend those higher fiber foods that are going to be slower to absorb into the bloodstream because they're just more to chew, more to take in. And that's also going to be good for your jaw structure and the muscles within your face. Save your food and notice what affects your eating speed. So if you notice if you're stressed or if you notice if certain stimuluses are on or certain people around you, take note and be mindful of the things that increase and slow down your speed and refine your practice with those around you. So, of course, with family members, if you want to and feel comfortable to ask for support and to share what you've been working on, they might be able to help you with a loving nudge and say, oh, hey, eating a little quickly today. But of course, we always want to avoid the food police because that's never our goal here. It's more just to be coming from a place of support. It is okay and completely normal to eat for pleasure. That's what we want. We want 80/20, 80% of the time eating mindfully, eating consciously, 20% give yourself that splurge, right? Like, so if you guys want to go out for ice cream with the family, of course, have that splurge. But it's the I'm coming in the door, I'm stressed, I'm just eating to eat, I don't even know what I'm eating that we want to try to avoid. Of course, if it tastes amazing, connects us with friends and family, creates a sense of belonging, makes celebrations worthwhile, it's okay to eat food for pleasure. But you just want to make sure you're actually having it for pleasure because we've all had to walk by, take a piece of candy from the Halloween bowl. We're eating it. I don't even like this candy. Why did I even grab it? Concept. I'm just doing it just to do it. I don't know how I caught myself doing this. So just you want to make sure it's serving some kind of purpose and that it's worthwhile, right? So if I'm going out for dinner with a loved one and I want to have the steak, I'm going to do that. But then when I get home, I'm not going to go so much for the ice cream, say. So you do want to have that balanced mindset as well applied to it. So these are some strategies for dealing with some of those trigger foods that might be in sight and mind in the house that, are harder to get rid of. But in general, you want to buy sweets, but only individual sizes, maybe instead of buying like the half-gallon ice cream, maybe get the pint of the Nick's ice cream, for example. Keep trigger food, or the chocolate covered frozen bananas are great. Keep trigger foods out of the house for now, out of sight, out of mind. Focus on addition, eating more veggies versus subtraction. So, like, I want to focus on the positive. I want to eat that food because that food has fiber. It's going to make me feel full. It also has, some beta carotene in there, some vitamin A. It's going to be good for my eyes. Awesome. I want that food. You want to eat slowly, no distractions, while paying attention to your sensations of hunger and fullness, enjoyment and thoughts. Of course, this all rotates around that family Mediterranean meal table. Indulge after you've comforted yourself in other ways. So if you are craving something intensely and you know it's a craving, go try to do something else. See if it passes with time. If not, then come back to it and indulge, but maybe try to do like a sweet swap or a smaller portion. But some ways to kind of distract is like playing with the pet, resting under a weighted blanket, ranting in a journal is always fun. Getting that stress relief out, smacking some golf balls. Study your relationships with certain food. Whenever you find yourself wanting them, notice your craving, name it, and investigate why you're feeling it. Sometimes when you name certain triggers and certain things, it helps you to address it in a more tangible way. Eat it every single day is another one. It's kind of a funny one, but it's an experiment to see how it affects your cravings. If I have, chocolate every day, I'm probably going to stop craving it if I'm having it so intensely. It's not going to be good in the short term, but long term, it might actually help my cravings. Abstaining for a while. So that's the other side of the direction that we can go in, is completely abstaining from that food and seeing if you even start to have those cravings now that they're out of your system. Again, it's like throwing stones, though. Everybody's different, and some of these tips are going to really work for you, and some won't really work for you. But you got to try different things and be flexible and be open minded as you're along your doing and moving along your journey towards your health and lifestyle related goals. Of course, change your routine to avoid certain situations, smells, sights, peer pressures that tend to increase your cravings. So, if I have the candy bowl always out in the house, maybe I'll get rid of the candy bowl because I know that's probably very triggering and that's a situation that I can avoid. Solve lifestyle factors like lack of sleep, lack of exercise, lack of protein. That could be bolstering cravings. Lack of water is another very common one. Change your language from that's bad to that makes it harder for me to achieve my goals, or I tend to overeat that. So that's similar with naming it. You're making it more tangible and you're addressing it more head on. Because if with food, when we eat it, it disappears and then we move on with our day and then we forget about it. So when you make more of a mindful point to put it on the mind, to discuss it, to write it out, to talk it out, it's going to be committed more to memory. And then lastly, these are some resources for some more information. Of course, we highly encourage members to book one-on-one nutrition counseling appointments here at the World Trade Center Health and Wellness Program through Stony Brook. We only see responders through this program. We do encourage you guys to bring significant others with you or a support family member with you to these appointments if you wish. We also have our website located here for various referrals relating to the World Trade Center Health Program. But below, we also have our Wix website, which is a website that we have that has a whole course on the Mediterranean diet. A lot of these past videos that we've already made, that if you really like this and you want to look at some other ones, like maybe on snacking or heart health, please check it out. It can also be used in conjunction with one-on-one counseling. And like I said earlier, we put the Calm app in here because those meditation apps can be really great at helping us to be mindful and present in the moment, to acknowledge hunger versus cravings, and if it is a craving, what emotion we're feeling that we're coping for. Thank you for watching this presentation. Again, this is a recording of one that we provided in the month of May live to attendees. So usually they are done live with responders with a Q&A at the end. So please, if you have any questions and you want to reach out, you can always reach out to us at the World Trade Center Health Program with Stony Brook. And I do want to say thank you for your time and attention today and watching this video. And I hope we all learned something new today. Be well, guys. Bye.